but on the other hand, it's worth going.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Great to see you all. I want to start today's Torah discussion with a question. When we say the why, yeah, go ahead. Why? When we bless our children, we bless our daughters that they be like. Yesimech Elohim ke Dara, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. May God make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, which makes sense, right? Our matriarchs. So what would you assume we would bless our sons to be like? Our patriarchs. Yesimcha Elohim ke, but it's not. It's Prime Menashe. Why?
The first set of siblings that got along with each other. I don't know. There's nothing.
Is that a guess?
No, I mean, I've heard that before, but there's nothing in the Torah about any of their interaction with anybody,
Good. Okay.
including each other
Right. So
or their fathers.
that's at the heart of the question is we know so much about our matriarchs. It makes sense to bless our daughters that they be like them and embody their values. We know so much about our patriarchs. It would make sense that we bless, but we don't. We ask that God bless them like two figures that we know very little about, Ephraim and Menashe. So the question is why? And Ron, who very casually threw out an answer, we're going to come back to, which is that maybe they're the first two siblings to actually get along, which leads us into our discussion today, which I've titled Brotherly Love. So let's dive in to the first text. This is from
the others are the people we want you to follow.
potentially. Well, we would want you to follow the patriarchs, right? Abraham.
Well, I've made this comment before also. I'd rather follow the matriarchs than the patriarchs. They were better.
Right, there are examples, I'm sure you're thinking of Jacob and Esau, where Isaac had a preference for Jacob because he was, or for Esau because he was a hunter and would bring him food he liked, but Rebecca knew it was Jacob, so that's certainly an example of matriarchs having a clearer insight. Yeah,
Basically, there's no baggage. There's not as much baggage.
yeah,
Because otherwise, they don't really do anything. I mean, they sort of.
right.
I'm partial to the names because my father was a twin. He was Menashe and his twin was Ephraim.
Oh, wow, that's funny.
His
That's
father
right.
was right there.
Not Esau and Jacob, huh? Wasn't really
Doesn't one of them have a role in the Parsha this week? Jacob asked him, or Joseph asked him to go. Tell them to come in. Group or text their bags or something.
Oh, that's Benjamin. Joseph plants his goblet in Benjamin's bag and frames that's his younger brother, the youngest of the 12 tribes.
But who are the
Ephraim and Menashe are Joseph's two sons.
right? But
We meet them next week. Next week's parsha, Jacob is going to give once they reunite, Joseph and Jacob gets to see not only his son, who he thought was dead, but his grandchildren, and offers them a blessing. And he blesses the younger before the older. And Jacob crosses his arms. So Joseph crosses his arms and says, no, father, it's the other way. Bless the older first. But Jacob, given his experience of being the younger and the younger receiving the blood. But actually, that's one of our texts we're going to get into. But I believe that's next week.
Actually,
But this week,
in every generation was the second son.
right? It's always the second. It's the younger. That's a theme. Okay, I want us.
Jacob was the second son. Solomon wasn't the first son. David wasn't the first son.
Right.
Find me one where the first son was the first son.
Right. We don't really like firstborns. That's
No.
why they have to fast. On
So why do we give him a double portion?
Right. But I think, yeah. Oh, well, I think Naphtali might be Ruthenbeck. Naphtali Ruthenbeck. I don't know.
But I know the student is okay. Say something?
Maybe could you go find Rabbi Josh and ask him?
I'll say something.
You don't know.
Well,
We don't like to have, we like to be friendly here, so who is here? We see Nelson. The whole thing seems to be different. Okay.
yeah, Ruthenbeck. Yeah, that's what I thought. Naphtali. Hi, Naphtali. Nice to see you. And how about student?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey. It's like the Masked Singer, if anybody watches. Okay, welcome, everyone. And I love the Hanukkah shirt. How could you have deprived us of that by being on your screen anonymous? Yeah, we want to see the shirt. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Zoomers, you can access the source sheet. It should be on the website. It wasn't sent out on the email. I got it in too late. But if you go on the Torah Cafe tab, you should be able to access the source sheet to follow along from home. So let's dive into our first text. This is from this week's Parsha from Miketz. Who'd like to read it in English? This is about Pharaoh's dream, right? Pharaoh has a dream and Joseph will interpret it. Please, yeah.
But presently, 7 other cows came up from the Nile close behind them, ugly and gaunt, and stood beside the cows on the bank of the Nile.
Good. So we have Pharaoh has a dream about 7 lean and 7 fat cows. Hey, Naphtali, nice to see you. And hi, Shira, good to see you. Pharaoh has a dream about 7 fat cows that get swallowed up by 7 gaunt and skinny cows. Same with ears of corn, right? 7 good ears get swallowed up by 7 bad ears. Joseph interprets the dream that these are 7 years of bounty and plenty that Egypt is going to experience, followed by 7 years of famine. That's Joseph's interpretation of the dream. But we have the Sfat Emet, who's a 19th century Hasidic commentator. He has a different interpretation of the dream, which is, I think, kind of Freudian. He's going to dive into Pharaoh's subconscious. So who would like to, God bless you, love you. Who would like to read Sfat Emet's commentary?
I can continue.
Go ahead.
The lean cattle symbolize the evil inclination, and the 3 actions mentioned here came up after them, stood by them, and ate them are the 3 stages of the evil inclination. The first stage is to come up after them, to examine what the individual is doing. The second step is to stand by them, to befriend the person, to accompany him. The third step is to eat them, swallow up his victim completely. Thus, our sages tell us at first the evil inclination becomes a guest, and afterwards he becomes the master of the house.
Good. So he's reading in this dream a parable for our interaction with the evil inclination. And he describes it as crafty, right? First, it comes up to you. And by the way, this is all in the context of talking about brotherly, sisterly love and what gets in the way of us all just getting along, right? So that's why I'm taking us now into a discussion of the evil inclination through Pharaoh's dream. So first, the evil inclination sort of comes up and pursues you, and then kind of casually stands by you, befriends you, maybe makes you think that you need it or that it can be helpful to you. And then when you let your guard down, it eats you up. And that's how Sfat Emet is interpreting the 7 small skinny cows eating up the fat cows. And his proof text comes from Gemara, it comes from Midrash, different places, that at first the evil inclination becomes a guest and afterwards he becomes the master of the house. So you can sort of imagine it knocking on your door, asking for a cup of sugar, totally harmless, so you welcome it in, and then before you know it, it's taken over. It's now the master of the house. The house could be your mind, your heart, could be it. But I actually like house being here, family dynamics too, right? It could take over the house. It could spoil healthier or better family dynamics. How do people react to this text? Does it strike them as being an accurate description of sort of our evil inclination and how it works?
I'm just curious how it ties in with Pharaoh and the dreams and everything else. And it's like he's taking this completely as a separate thing.
Yes.
But there's no tie-in to the context of the Parsha.
Right. So the Sfat Emet is a Hasidic commentator, and Hasidim are very, among other things, interested in the evil inclination and how to conquer the evil inclination, how to be a better, how to be a better mensch, how to be a better person. So for him, he's seeing in this, he's drashing on it, taking it out of its original context to give us a Torah insight about how to overcome our evil inclination. by understanding it. Nelson?
You muted.
Still muted, Nelson, still muted. There you go.
One, I have two comments. One is about the Parsha in relation to this. First, the Egyptians were our friends. They fed us. They welcomed us. They gave us a place to live. And then they enslaved us.
Uh-huh. Well, go ahead, yeah.
And the second is about addiction, chemical addiction. I was thinking of, first it's fun and it's just a little extra, and then it becomes the master.
Right, right.
You do anything to get more.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I sort of saw addiction in this as well. To the first point, I would say that doesn't that strike us true of our own lived experience, that a country or a place could first welcome us in and we thrive, and then we become almost too successful and they get jealous or hateful and then they enslave us. They try to kill us. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking Germany, but right. So it's throughout. So I think that's what happened. And but Exodus begins with one of the scariest lines in Tanakh, which is a new Pharaoh arose who knew not Joseph. So you had a new Pharaoh. There's a new king in town. Things can turn on a dime. Okay, so good. Let's have some more comments. Yeah.
Missed the text, but how did Joseph get his credibility in terms of interpreting dreams? How was he seen as credible?
Well, for the Egyptians, it was because when he was in the prison cell, the baker and the butler of Pharaoh had dreams, and Joseph interpreted them correctly. He knew that the butler would be restored to his position and the baker would be executed, and that happened. So when the butler comes to Pharaoh, when Pharaoh has a bad dream and says, "Oh, when I was in prison, there's a wonder kid." Right, a wonder kid who can interpret dreams. Hi, welcome, guys. Nice to see you. Shabbat shalom. So just a quick recap. We're talking today about brotherly love. We all know that our Torah has plenty of examples of just brothers getting along and loving each other, which is not true at all. And the Joseph story is no exception. Joseph's brothers try to kill him, and then they say, well, actually, no, we should sell him to slavery. Our first text, we were interpreting Pharaoh's dream about 7 lean and skinny cows eating up 7 fat cows, meaning 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. But there's a commentator, the Sfat Emet, which is our second source, who says, actually, we can interpret this dream differently. Thank you. Which is that it's really talking about the nature of the evil inclination, which just like the cows came up next to the other cows, that's what the evil inclination does first. It sort of approaches you, then it stands by them, which he interprets as like befriending, like befriends you, and then it swallows you up. And it's sort of the last piece here. It says it's like at first the evil inclination becomes a guest in your house and afterwards becomes the master of the house. So if you let it in, I was thinking of it. There's 2 examples like it. One, I was thinking of like if you have a cube of cheese or like a block of cheese, right? I'm just going to have a little cheese, and then all of a sudden you've eaten the whole cheese. But Nelson was talking about addiction on a much serious note.
Addiction.
You're right. Cheese is addiction too, right? A sort of less lethal form. Yeah, chocolate too, going back to chocolate. But so that idea of it could be something much worse, a chemical addiction where your body needs it and you become almost a slave to it. Yeah, go ahead.
You can see this also in Macbeth.
Macbeth, yeah.
Addiction is not such a bad thing. Something happens, but then it takes
Good.
on and gets much worse.
Right, absolutely good. So I love that, seeing Macbeth in this as well. The play that must not be named. Yeah.
So as people, as victims of this, like we have no power over this, it's sort of disturbing. It doesn't talk about how we can recognize this and how we can overcome it, because people can't overcome their inclination. But this is saying you're just a victim, you're going to be eaten up and just forget about it. Well,
Good.
I don't know if it says that exactly, but it's certainly victimizing people.
Good. So Lois, I want you to hang on to that, because Lois is saying what is missing here is choice and power. And certainly if you continue to go with the addiction model, there's, one of the first steps, if not right after you accept that you have a problem, it's a belief in a higher power. It doesn't need to be God, but some sort of, and also trying to shed the victim narratives, right? Often there's a victim narrative that can really trap an addict in that story and can't break it. But if you empower right? And so actually, we can, there's a Beit Tshuva is a rehab center in Los Angeles, but it's through a Torah lens. It accepts non-Jews, but it's through Torah study and through obviously counselors and more. But anyway, so good. I think that's a great point. We are going to slowly be making our way to a place of power and choice throughout the course of this study, I promise you. So hold on to that. I'm going to move on now to the next text. This is from Sforno.
This one a lot better.
Sforno is an 11th century Italian commentator. And he believes, I get a kick out of his definition of brotherly love. So go ahead and who wants to read?
I'll read.
Go ahead.
Still, they felt that selling Joseph had not been intended to be detrimental to
This is
him.
his brothers, obviously. Yeah.
Rather, seeing they had considered themselves endangered by him as an assailant.
Good, I'll just pause for a sec. Sorry to interrupt you, but
Say the word.
yeah, Rodev, but assailant is good. It means somebody who's wanting to kill you. So Sforno is actually sort of the defense attorney for Joseph's brothers, saying, actually they're justified in selling him because they could have done much worse because Joseph was trying to kill them, which is a weird interpretation. But I guess if you say like he was clearly declaring his dominance over them with his dreams, and Sforno somehow arrives at the conclusion that the brothers thought that Joseph was a threat to their lives, and so therefore legally would have been entitled to self-defense. But go ahead, keep reading.
They considered this at the time as mild compared to killing him, which they thought they were entitled to do. The very fact that they had not killed him at the time, they had considered as proof of their brotherly love.
Which is funny. I'm just gonna say one point, then I'm gonna get which is that at first it's funny. It's just funny that is the low bar, right, for brotherly love. At the same time, if you look at the precedent, at the examples before them, you come to realize actually that's pretty good for where we are in our development in terms of family dynamics, because we have Jacob and Esau who, there's threat of killing each other. You have Cain and Abel, where that actually comes to fruition, where brothers kill each other. So the fact that this time we're selling each other to slavery and not killing each other, hey, that's progress, right? The baby steps. Okay, Sheila and then Bijan.
It's interesting how this plays out when Joseph reveals himself as Caesar.
Yeah.
In Egypt. They sort of stand as a group.
Yes, good.
Suddenly, it's just the opposite dynamic. He's like taking the same kind of, it's a reversal, a complete reversal. 1 versus 11, and then 11 versus 1. It's.
Yeah, right.
It's the only thing that can justify Sforno, because otherwise these, come on,
Right. Well, even in the Torah itself, in the Pshat, right, you have Joseph having this dream that there 11 sheaves of grain bow down to his sheaf of grain, and the moon and the stars bow down to him, right, to his, to the stars bow down to his, to the moon and his star, and the brothers want to quash that dream by dominating him, by selling him, by killing him. But in doing so, they actually set the wheel in motion for that self-fulfilling prophecy, because now they come bowing down to who they perceive as Pharaoh's vizier, right? Vizier, I guess. And it's actually Joseph. So it comes to fruition. But it is that reversal. That's by design. Bijan? And then, we're going to go to Zoom right next.
Sforno's interpretation of the brothers feeling endangered by Joseph makes me think about this notion in Western societies that people say, oh, I felt he was going to kill me.
Right.
It is an oxymoron type of a notion that is very typical to Western societies. It's like, did he kill you? Wait to get killed and then say, oh yeah, he killed me, obviously. But I felt.
Right. Yeah, it makes me.
There's such a thing even in judgment and among judges and somebody can go and complain that I felt You are threatening.
Right. How much rope do you give to somebody to a feeling versus evidence of a threat, right? Just because you thought that they were going to kill you, does that give you, a blank check to defend yourself as opposed to, waiting for more proof? That's a good point. It's attention. Yes, from Zoom. Ivan, yeah, please.
Yeah, we talked about this last week. The narrative suggests that the brothers believe that Joseph is dead. In other words, they didn't sell him into slavery. They were having lunch. They looked up and they saw I guess it was the Midianites coming. The Midianites, he took him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites, and the Ishmaelites sold him into slavery in Egypt. And that fits much better with the narrative that, they're so guilty. The guilt of the brothers in the narrative later on is really a driving force in the story.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to remember that. They believe he's dead. Whether Jacob believes he's dead is another story. I think Jacob does believe he's dead, but he probably knows it was the brothers that committed the crime.
Good. So, by the way, if you're just joining us, I want to remind you that the source sheet should be on the website under Torah Cafe, so you can follow along from Zoom. Ivan, those are good points. I would say to that Sforno tends to have a humanistic interpretation. He always he was a humanist, and I think he's giving the brothers maybe too much credit, which I hear you saying a bit, that it wasn't that out of the generosity of their hearts they decided to sell him instead of kill him. That was basically a death sentence that they could profit from. Because there are commentators who say that they believe that Joseph wouldn't be able to survive slavery in Egypt because he was, he was gentle. He was, So I think it's good you could certainly push back on Sforno and say, I think that's a generous read to the brothers. But still, I wanted to show us that this sort of in the development of our characters in the Bible, of our ancestors in terms of family dynamics, you could say that this is a step in the right direction, obviously not there yet. So let's keep going. This is now Rabbi David of Lilov. I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly, but from Poland, he's a Hasidic rabbi. This is 17th, 18th century. Who would like to read? This is You Are Spies. So this is when the brothers come before Joseph for food, not knowing that it's Joseph, thinking that, it's second to Pharaoh, and he's in charge of all the food. This is during the years of famine where the Joseph's brothers have now come to Egypt for food. And Joseph, who knows that it's them, but they don't know that it's him, says, you are spies. You've come here to spy on Egypt, to sort of play with them a little bit, right? He knows he's got them, and he might be doing something a little bit more than just playing with them. So let's who wants to read? You Are Spies. Go for it. Thanks, Jack.
You are spies. The community cannot be redeemed until it recognizes its faults and makes efforts to correct them. The same is true for each individual. As long as the community or the individual do not recognize what wrongs they have done, they obviously will not try to improve themselves, and they are not worthy of redemption. This we see from Torah. As long as Joseph's brothers kept insisting, we are true men, they were not worthy of being redeemed. On the contrary, Joseph became angry at them. This is what I spoke to you, saying you are spies. Only after that, they realized that they were wrong and said, we are indeed guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded to us, and we would not hear. Did their redemption begin? God then filled Joseph's heart with mercy for his brother.
So I think that here, Rabbi David of Lilov is saying that Joseph is doing something more than just, come on in, something more than just sort of playing with his brothers and giving them a hard time. but that he was actually bringing out the best in them by saying, you still don't think you've done anything wrong. In your mind, you are true men, as they say, though. You know, you are you've done nothing wrong. You're totally in the right. But by saying you are spies, he's sort of saying you're not who you think you are. You know, reconsider what you've done and in a new light. That maybe you're not blameless, right? That Sforno saying that they could have killed him, but instead they sold him in slavery. So we are true men. We're fine. Reconsider. This to me goes back to the nature of the evil inclination, that it sort of creeps up on you, invites itself, you invite it in, and then it swallows you up to the point where you're no longer who you are now taken over. There's a new driver in the seat, right? So I think that may have happened to the brothers, where they think that they're still who they are. We are true men, but in reality, they've been swallowed up by their evil inclinations. And Joseph is saying, you are spies, right? You're not really who I know you to be. Right. So what I love here about in terms of our conversation on brotherly love is maybe Joseph is saying, yeah, we're on the second page, top one. Yeah. That maybe what Joseph is telling us here, or what this Hasidic rabbi is telling us about the nature of brotherly love, is that brothers or sisters remind you of who you truly are when you forget. Right. Somebody who you grew up with, who knows you from the start, holds sort of the keys to unlocking who you are if ever you forget. So here Joseph is saying, you're not who you really are. And then what happens, and what's about to happen is the reverse, that the brothers are about to unlock in Joseph a reminder of who he really is. Because right now, he's sort of a spy, right? He's not really his true self. He's not even Joseph. He's got an Egyptian name. He's Safnat Parnea, right? He's literally in disguise. And the brothers are going to stir up in Joseph, which is our next text, the moment where Joseph reveals himself and says, I am Joseph. So you have this moment between brothers where each is bringing out the best self in the other now, reminding each other who they truly are deep down. Okay, I see a couple comments on Zoom and then we'll go in the room. Ivan?
By the word spies.
Uh-huh.
It means something different here from the way we use it in modern times.
So Miraglim in Hebrew, spies. There's some commentary that Joseph scouts, they could be scouts. There's commentary saying that the reason Joseph uses that, it's a strategy to say, I don't want you guys to find out who I am by talking to other Egyptians and hearing my story. And if I accuse you of being spies, that'll prevent you from going and fraternizing with other Egyptians, because then that would only give fodder for the accusation that you are spies. So he's sort of using it as I need to control it. I need to make sure you don't find out who I am.
Label on them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Ivan?
Last week, we looked in depth at chapter 38, the Judah and Tamar story. And the text is actually telling us in chapter 38 that this was sort of a trial for Judah, the whole thing, and that it constitutes a moral and ethical education for him.
Right.
That what he did to Tamar, and that he didn't represent his sons properly because he didn't, he wouldn't allow Tamar to have her satisfaction, fulfillment as a wife and a mother.
Yeah.
And he is really the one here that is the righteous one now, in a sense.
Right.
He's gone through so much. He's lost a couple sons, just like his father has. He can empathize. And in the end, he's going to be the one that turns Joseph around with this incredible speech.
Right.
And he, in fact, does become the unifier of the brothers, of the family. I mean, Judaism
comes from Judah. Right.
Right. And that, so he's a character to keep your eye on. And it's Joseph who is kind of intoxicated with power at this point.
Okay, good. So I wanna say a couple things about that. One is, right, even in this commentary we just read, it's about redemption, right? You can't be redeemed until you've acknowledged that you've made a mistake, right? Until you can sort of pinpoint where the evil inclination is in the story, right? So that there's a separation from it, so that you're not subsumed by it, but you can say, oh, wait, that wasn't my true self who did that, or maybe that's a piece of me, but that's not who I want to be in the future. Or, so there needs to be a distance from it. So this is setting in motion Judah's redemption and the brothers' redemption, because at first they sold Joseph into slavery, and now they get to a point where Benjamin is being threatened to be held in slavery. Joseph threatens to hold Benjamin, and they say, take me, right? Judah says, take me, but spare the boy. So now they've had the full development of character arc to be redeemed and say, we made the mistake of selling one brother before. We're not letting you take another brother. And I like what you pointed to, that at this point, Judah has lost, Aaron, Onan, Judah loses two sons. And so maybe something has happened to him to set his growth in motion. I think that's a good point. And that we are, Judaism, right? Judah, there's something about Judah. So if you could say what core to being a Jew is redemption, is tshuva, is this belief in growth and personal growth and overcoming our evil inclination, right? It's central to who we are. But it's interesting. It goes back to our conversation on brothers and sisters and sibling dynamics, because I once was doing for a board, like a draft for a board meeting, and in my internship, not here, it was my internship back in LA. And it's always has to be on leadership. When you generally for the board meetings, you talk about leadership. And I said, what is the best example of Joseph's leadership? Because there's a lot of really good leadership on Joseph's part. Would you say it's option A, his vision, right? He has dreams of the future. A good leader has to have vision. Would you say it's B, sort of his political savvy? He not only is able to logistically store up the bounty in the good years to weather the bad years, but he also monopolizes everything for Egypt, right? In the end, everybody sells their land to Pharaoh in order to make it through the famine. So he has increased the coffers of Egypt, a millionfold. Or would you say it's C, he throws his brothers in jail? Or Benjamin, he takes Benjamin and what would you say is the best example of sort of punitive, what's the best example? And obviously people said A and people said B and people said, I know this is a trick question and it's C. And I said, you're right, it's C. And the reason I think it's C is that not because it's vengeance, but it's because Joseph is orchestrating a plot to bring out the best in his brothers. That by holding Benjamin, he is creating the conditions for Judah to step forward and say, take me, not him. And that goes back to brothers and sisters, about unlocking who each other truly is, bringing out the best in each other, holding each other's identity and knowing who you truly are. So I want to move on to the next. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know if this fits in or not. I was listening to some podcast earlier this week. It talked about the fact that Joseph called the brothers spies here, and then Moshe sending the spies to Israel, or to Canaan, whatever it was. And that was what was interesting to him, was that the two that came back with the positive report were one was a descendant of Judah and the other one was a descendant of Joseph.
Wow, that's nice. So Joshua and Caleb, yeah.
Right. And I don't know how he wormed it together, but he did somehow.
Oh, that's cool. So that goes to Jackie's point about why spies here. Maybe there is some sort of connection. That's great. Nelson, is that your hand? Yeah,
Yes,
go ahead.
my hand. And am I?
Oh, you're muted now.
Now I am.
Okay,
All
you're
right.
good.
But the brothers feared that's what Joseph was when he was a kid. He came to watch them shepherd, not to help them,
Right.
but to spy for their father.
Nice, good.
Right.
Yeah.
And he, by using that word spies, he's sort of trying to remind them how something can be misinterpreted.
I like that a lot. I hadn't thought of that. Right. So it says that Joseph brings a dibah, which is an evil report of his brothers to their father, to Jacob. And so in a sense, he was acting like a spy. on his brothers. And that was part of what elicited their rage, and maybe why Sforno thinks that Joseph was actually more malicious than we give him credit for. And so the brothers were justified in what they did, right? So that's a good point. So that also brings that whole thing full circle. But I love the idea that he is accusing them of being something they're not, which is true. You know, that they didn't see their own sin, but also, well, all the while he is in disguise. He is not who he truly is. And so there's this mutual uplift and reminder of who they are, each other is. Yeah, Ivan.
The other thing is that, you know, if we jump forward to Jacob's appearance finally in Egypt, when he sees Joseph, he realizes that Joseph has assimilated, that he, like you're saying, he is become Egyptianized, and he literally adopts Ephraim and Manasseh.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's, some people interpret that as a double kind of blessing for Joseph. But I think that he realizes that he has to do that in order to save that part of the family from assimilating into the Egyptian culture.
Sure, that's very interesting.
That's good.
Yeah, I like that.
And if you watch and if you listen and read the narrative closely, you'll see that Jacob is appalled by what he sees. He's, you know, he realizes that he's wrong about Joseph as the one to become the leader.
Well, that's interesting. I would only counter that by saying, what's Joseph's last wish?
To be buried in Israel.
To be buried in Israel. Right. And Moses takes his bones over. So I would say that I think he ends up in a good place. But I like your bringing up Jacob's concern about the assimilation. That's a good piece. Any more comments in the room before we?
This isn't the time. We don't have time, but really to discuss Jacob. You know, he's a character, really. I mean, as a father and what he does with his children.
Yeah. No, but we're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that because Jacob has a big role in this sibling rivalry thing, right? He gave Joseph a coat of many colors and said, "I love you most." You know, so we are talking about how the evil inclination takes over the house, right? How it corrupts family dynamics and sibling relationships that we hope could move in a direction of more love and support. Yeah, no, that's
the youngest is the oldest and the youngest.
Oh, family dynamics continue to be incredibly that has not changed, right? Our Torah is valid for all time, right? It speaks to universal truths. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going because we're now moving into the direction of redemption and reconciliation between the brothers. So let's go when Joseph finally says, "I am Joseph," and reveals himself. The question is, what sort of drives him to finally showing his hand? You know, showing his cards. What propels him over the top emotionally to reveal himself? So let's start with Genesis 43:30. Who wants to read that and go into the Rashi? Go ahead. Okay.
With that, Joseph hurried out, for he was overcome with feeling toward his brother, was on the verge of tears. He went into a room and wept there.
Good. So he needed a moment to collect himself. He was so emotional, seeing his brothers and seeing not only his brothers, but their redemption arc that Judah was after Judah's speech on behalf of Benjamin, seeing that they have grown and changed. Something is unlocked in him. Go ahead.
For his compassion was excited. He asked him.
This is Joseph asking Benjamin. So Joseph asked Benjamin, his younger brother.
He asked him, "Have you a brother of the same mother as yourself?" He replied, "I had a brother, but I know not where he is." "Have you sons?" He replied, "I have 10. Joseph asked him, "And what are their names?" Benjamin replied, "Beller, Becher."
Good. So he says the names of all 10 sons, and that's in Genesis, that's later. We get the genealogy of Benjamin, we get the name of his sons, so he lists all 10 names. This is Midrash. This didn't actually happen. This is Rashi is quoting a Midrash where this conversation between Joseph and Benjamin happened. He asked him for his sons' names and using a quote, a verse that comes later where the Torah gives us the names of his 10 sons. He's putting that in the mouth of Benjamin in a conversation with Joseph. These are their names. Okay, go ahead.
Joseph then inquired, what are the ideas underlying these names? He replied, they all have some reference to my brother and the troubles that have befallen him. I called them Bela because he disappeared amongst alien nations.
Good, so Bela and Nivla, it's the same root. You'll see this is all midrashic wordplay. So he named him Bela, because that means disappeared, and Joseph disappeared.
Becher, because he was the firstborn of his mother.
Right, Becher and Bechor. You see the same root here. So yeah, he was the firstborn.
Ashbel, because God sent him into captivity. Jerah, because he had to live in a foreign country.
Right, that's Ger, being a foreigner in a foreign place.
Naaman, because he was exceedingly pleasant.
It says that Joseph was right. That's why Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him. Okay, keep going.
He and Rosh, because he was my brother.
Ach and Rosh, brother and
my superior.
Rosh means head or superior.
Mupim, because he learned from the mouth of my father.
Mp, like from the mouth of,
Mupim, because he did not witness my marriage canopy.
Yeah, chuppah.
And I did not witness his marriage. And Ard, because he went down amongst the nations.
Yeah, right.
When he heard all this, immediately his affection was enkindled.
So this one is a really moving piece for me because as far as Joseph,
Sound like Tashi.
well, he's quoting Midrash.
Oh,
He knew all the Midrash. Rashi knew all the Midrash. But so Joseph, for all he knew, was dead to his brothers. They sold him to slavery. They never got in touch. They didn't care what happened to him. And here he's getting evidence that actually here's a brother who, at least one, who never forgot about him and named all 10 of his children after to remind him of him. So Joseph actually is not dead to his brother. He's lived on through, and to that point that you never forget.
But only to his own brother or the other brothers are stepbrothers. That's the difference.
Half brothers.
Good. So right, they're all half brothers because Jacob there's Rachel, there was Leah, there were the handmaids. So those brothers are less connected to Joseph than Benjamin. Benjamin and Joseph share the same mother, Rachel. And so fair, right? It's sort of, maybe, is it all because of Benjamin? Maybe, because they had that intimate connection. They were true, like, not to say half brothers, but they were blood brothers. And maybe that's another special bond. Good. But here you have, we're now making a departure from the typical sibling dynamics that we're used to in Torah, where there's evil inclination comes to destroy it because of jealousy, because of dominance, right? Jacob and Esau is really a story of dominance, one dominating the other. Cain and Abel is jealousy, right? Why did God prefer your sacrifice to my sacrifice? There's Ishmael and Isaac, right? Which was jealousy on the part of Sarah, right? I don't want this Hagar's child to inherit with Isaac, right? So there was jealousy between mothers there. But the jealousy and dominance, which we might link to the evil inclination, not to say that those are always bad things. I think we can, there's a story that, a hypothetical of what happened if we just got rid of the evil inclination? What if we totally eradicated the evil inclination? Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that lead to Gan Eden again, to Garden of Eden? And the story is no, because what happened is they wake up the next morning And there are no eggs because the chickens wouldn't mate with each other. There's no, right, that the evil inclination, when channeled correctly, is in that case literally productive, reproductive, but that the evil inclination in the end, it's not our goal to totally.
Are you calling sex evil?
No, I'm not. I'm saying, I was saying that, but maybe it comes from a place that's more animalistic in nature, right? That not evil, but it can be weaponized, right? So I think,
Think about it.
right, you can weaponize. Right, and actually, I think,
It sounds like a Christian.
right, it's mixed in Judaism. Judaism generally is more embracing of. Right. Right.
Say it's okay, you're supposed to do it on Shabbos.
But there are still a lot of rules around it, right? We try to rein it in.
Yeah.
Right? You don't let it, we're not about free love, right? Joseph says that in the musical Joseph, right? We're so. Right, in a way that it's like original sin, which we reject, right? That it's not inherently sinful. There's no question about that. In Judaism, it's a beautiful thing, it's a holy thing, but it needs to be reined in and it basically, you know, our Yetzer HaTov, our good inclination, needs to be in partnership with our evil inclination, right? It's not about squashing and eliminating. It's about reining in and partnering, but ultimately the good inclination has to have control, has to be the behind the wheel. But so, right. So but that was just that midrash. I was just giving you one example that it was basically saying, if you got rid of the evil inclination, society would fall apart. You need it, but you can't be subservient to it. Right. It needs to be channeled for good. Okay. So now I want to go into my original question was, why do we bless the boys when we bless our children, that they be like Ephraim and Manasseh, and our girls like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah? Why the matriarchs here and not the patriarchs, but Ephraim and Manasseh, of whom we know very little? Why do they get why do we bless that our sons be like them? And Ron actually had it. So who wants to read this one? This is by Rabbi David Menachem. He's a contemporary Israeli rabbi and cantor. Any volunteers to read? Please, Lois.
Jacob saves his greatest blessing for his grandchildren, Ephraim and Manasseh, in his words. In his words, he establishes them as a paradigmatic blessing. By you shall Israel invoke blessing, saying, God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. It was not for naught that they merited this blessing. They are the first brothers from the beginning of human history that do not hate or envy each other. The book of Genesis tells of the challenge of establishing the quality of human brotherhood. Cain and Abel, Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brother.
Right, all bad examples of brothers who succumb to the evil inclination and be jealous or to dominate each other.
I want to disagree, though.
Really? You had this in the beginning?
Benjamin and Joshua were full brothers, and they
Benjamin and Joseph. Benjamin and Joseph.
What did I say?
Benjamin and Joshua.
Yeah, Joseph.
No, that's fair. So you can critique that, but I think still, by and large, when you think of Joseph and his brothers, you don't think of Joseph and Benjamin and how they got along.
I mean, Benjamin really wasn't a part of the other 10 brothers who were evil.
Yeah, right. But still, you look at the example, Begadol, and by the big picture, Joseph and his brothers is another failing in the department of sibling dynamics. I would say.
Moses and Aaron had a nice relationship.
They
Not
did.
there yet.
Right, but this is.
But even they fell apart.
Before.
Sure. But nice. But that's after, right? This is before. Ephraim and Manasseh came before, and so that's why we point to them.
Is like.
Totally silent.
Yeah. Right.
He given. Well, magical.
Yeah.
In a way, Sheila, he was. He was the brother that was held back by Jacob not to go to Egypt.
Yes, that only then.
Right.
What happened before?
Well, that's a good question.
I take that to mean that Benjamin took Joseph's place in Jacob's mind.
It could be. That's up for
all those
interpretation.
years.
That's something, I'm sure. That's
right, because it seems to be a blank space. It's a good question. Yeah, but I want to keep reading. So Lois, would you continue?
Joseph took significant steps to repair their brotherhood. With his sons, it worked. Here, Jacob repeats the mistake with his grandchildren. again, he prefers the younger brother over the older brother.
That's when when he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, Manasseh is the oldest, Ephraim is the younger. So Jacob should bless, it's just the way it goes, that the older gets the extra blessing. So it should be that his right hand goes to Ephraim or to Manasseh, and then Manasseh is mentioned first. But Jacob is about to perpetuate the same kind of sibling rivalry, or at least
But
risk
he
to.
said, and that's what makes it.
Sure, yeah,
To say it,
right. But right,
make up another excuse.
fair, yeah, right. But I think what Rabbi David Menachem here is saying is that Joseph had done all this work now to reconcile with his brothers. We've just seen this, right? We just talked about it. He's done all this work to be, okay, we're going to turn over a new leaf in sibling dynamics. But then Jacob is going to come to give a blessing. And I think in Joseph's mind, Jacob is about to start this whole story over again with a new generation by continuing to do this favoritism thing of the younger. Right. So that's why Joseph, according to Rabbi Menachem, is intervening here. Keep going.
Okay. Again, he prefers the younger brother over the older brother. He puts his right hand on the head of the younger Ephraim and his left hand on the head of the elder Manasseh. In this act, he acts almost like the prophecy that was told to his mother during her pregnancy. 2 nations are in your womb, 2 separate people shall issue from your body. One people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger.
Right. That's Jacob and Esau in Rebekah's womb. That's the prophecy given to Rebekah that the elder will serve the younger. And so it's almost like Jacob is in Rachel's belly and Rachel's womb. And it's almost like Jacob is perpetuating the same dynamic. Keep going.
Joseph attempts to correct his father's mistake. Not so, father, Joseph said to his father, for the other is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. Jacob explains his preference. Yet the younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall be plentiful enough for nations.
So let's just pause right here. So I'm almost like I'm having an exhale of, like, no, Joseph is trying to, but I'm sure we've all experienced this. Maybe if you have kids and you want to raise them a certain way, and then your in-laws come in and they have, or your parents have, I haven't experienced this yet, but I imagine it's coming, right? But they're sort of like, no. Or even like with pets, right? Like there's a big debate in my younger brother and his wife are in a graduate school. They live with my parents, and my parents live with my grandma. So it's a sandwich generation, right? Both my grandma and my brother and his wife live with my parents. And yes, 3 generations. And my brother has a dog, and they don't feed the dog table food because they don't want the dog begging or barking at the table. We don't feed the dog table food. And my grandma desperately wants the dog to be Jewish. What I mean by that is she loves that when we light the Shabbat candles, all the dogs get challah bread, as she said. All the dogs get challah because they want, like Pavlov's dogs. When they light the candles, the dogs start wagging their tails because they know they get challah. That's what my grandma wants. My grandma wants their dog Willow to be Jewish. But my brother says, no, we're training her to be a good dog who doesn't beg at the. So my grandma, what she does is she slips Willow challah under the table so that my brother doesn't know, but it drives him crazy. But I think that's what's happening here, where Joseph is like, I want this to be a new generation that does not have this toxic sibling rivalry, and yet you are blessing the younger over at the expense of the older again. Why do we have to do this? And let's just finish this off, and then I'll get to comments.
Manasseh, the firstborn, hears this piercing sentence, and nevertheless, there was no trace of hatred in his heart about Ephraim, his younger brother.
So it's a sigh of relief. Woo. So even despite Jacob's risky move here of continuing to perpetuate, it lands differently this time. Somehow through Joseph and through his brother's story, something is changing with the new generation where even though Manasseh has grounds to be jealous of Ephraim, it doesn't take effect. Manasseh is okay with it. And that's why we bless our sons that they be like Ephraim and Manasseh, in the sense that even though we don't know anything about them besides this, which is that they didn't succumb to sibling rivalry. They were supportive of one another, and it seems they loved each other despite what could have gone the other way.
I'm going to throw something out that, even though Jacob preferred one over the other, Joseph didn't. And that reflected on Manasseh.
I like that. Okay, so maybe that was what did it. Yeah.
Interesting, we don't hear about sons afterwards, the brother, this kind of rivalry. It's like, okay, we're done with this topic.
Yes, but that's exactly right. The book of Genesis is rife with sibling rivalry, right? And when we get to Exodus, we don't really hear that anymore so much.
No, country rivalry.
Right. We go on to new things, but that seems to speak to maybe we conquered the evil inclination there, not to eradicate it, but to channel it. Not to say that we don't continue to face these issues, but maybe in our Torah, there's a sense of having achieved something.
I don't think it's ended. I think it just got lost in the story because there were more important things to discuss.
Yeah, sure. That's fair. Yeah.
2 points. One, I'm thinking that Menashe sees what his father went through. And he's not jealous because his father, look what he achieved, he was a younger one. You know, so that I think what it's saying is that you may want something, but you're not the person in control. I think part of this is a whole lesson to people and to parents saying you may have these ideas of where you want your kids to be and everything else, but you're not really the one in control, that God's in control. Because in all these, you know, God came, you know, as a dream and everything else to the mothers and told them specifically, this is what's going to be. So whatever you may want, or your husband Abraham or whatever, God's the one controlling everything else, you know. And so, and in this case, Menashe too, he sees that his, you know, he doesn't have control. That Jacob is a prophetic one. He's the father. Obviously, he's gotten somewhere from God somewhere this idea that his younger brother will be the one in charge, and he's more accepting of it because he sees that's the real case.
I was going to say that's the word I'm hearing with what you're saying, acceptance. That when we try to change, and that maybe a lot of the conflict comes from this inability to accept. But when you accept that there's room enough for everybody and that we all have a role in the scheme of God's plan. Yeah.
Plus, I'm thinking that, you know, maybe the idea of what the brothers get has changed over time, because originally, you know, it was the property, you were going to be the leader. You were kind of assured financially, leadership, everything else, that the older one would be the one to carry the lineage. You know, I'm not saying that because what's he going to get? I mean,
right.
Joseph, so, you know, he's in charge of everything. It's not like, oh, you know, that Ephraim and Menashe, you'll get 1/3 of the kingdom, you'll get 2/3 of the kingdom.
Right.
It's like
less to be jealous of.
Yeah, you know, maybe more the spiritual end of it, because they're saying that was part of it, but it doesn't assure them a better life as it did with the earlier generations.
Right. Good. That's a fun point.
I was going to throw something else out, and that's that they were half Egyptian. Maybe they didn't have enough Jewish hot-headed blood in them. The Egyptian blood wasn't hot-headed.
Okay, maybe. Okay, all interesting theories to account for this. But I just want to say one thing, and then we're going to do our last text, and I'm going to release you on time is the goal. So I just want to say that I think
Forget the on time.
Yeah,
let's keep going.
I think that the turning point here, and what this says about Judaism, is that we are not so much a religion of dominating the other, right? We're turning a leaf here where the brothers show a jealousy and dominance. That narrative is being shelved for a narrative of self-dominance, it's not about getting rid of our urge to dominate, right? That's the evil inclination, that's a part of us. But instead of letting it lead to toxic relationships and trying to dominate the other, we instead channel it for self-dominance, of self-improvement and growth. And Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel says, this ties it to Shabbat, that on 6 days, we seek to dominate the world. On Shabbat, we seek to dominate the self. That's what this is about, a day to really rest and reflect and think about who we are and who we should be, and not trying to master the world, so much as we try to master ourselves. So I want to end with this because Lois said, but I don't like this in this first text, there's no sense of being able to that power, right? We'll see
More like being a victim.
right. We're a victim to the evil inclination. We're not powerful over it. So I want to go, this takes us to Cain and Abel, the first fratricide, right? Where a jealousy over sacrifices that are accepted by God leads to Cain killing his brother Abel. But before that happened, right, when Cain is dejected that God preferred Abel's offer to Cain's, God says this to Abel. Who wants to read in English? Genesis 4:7. Go for it.
Surely if you do right, there is uplift. But if you do not do right, sin couches at the door. Its urge is toward you, yet thou mayest rule over it.
And Team Shalbo, Beata Team Shalbo, but you can rule over it, right? Sin is going to be there. It's never going to go away. The evil inclination is always going to be a part of it. This is what Cain is experiencing for the first time. What is this strange feeling I feel towards my brother? And God is saying, look, there is this thing called sin. There's this thing called the evil inclination. It crouches, right? It waits for you. But thou mayest rule over it. And if you've read East of Eden by John Steinbeck, which is a phenomenal masterpiece, there are pages and pages and pages. It turns into Talmud at one point. Literally in the book, they bring in rabbis to discuss Team Shalbo. What is the word Team Shal? And they bring in I think monks too, sages, trying to understand what is Team Shal. And they come up with three things. Team Shal could be, if you look at the grammar, if you look at the Hebrew, right, it could be thou must rule over it as like a command form. It could be that thou willst rule over it, meaning a future prediction. Like in the course of human history, you will rule over it. So don't worry, it's going to work out okay. Or it's a third option, which is thou mayest, which is an invitation. It's a choice. You can, you may not, but you have the choice. You have the power to. And this is from East of Eden. Somebody wrap us up with this. Go ahead.
Thou mayest. Why, that makes a man great. For in his weakness and his filth and his murder of his brother, he has still the great choice. He can choose his course and fight it through and win. You can never lose that. It cuts the feet from under weakness and cowardliness and laziness. I have a new love for that glittering instrument, the human soul. It is a lovely and unique thing in the universe. It is always attacked and never destroyed because thou mayest.
I want to leave us with that invitation. Thou mayest. Whenever you think that you're powerless over it, that you're a victim to it, that circumstances have driven you to a point of choicelessness, it might be a helpful reminder, thou mayest. Atatim shalbo. You can still yet make a choice. Go ahead.
That there's a call here to be constantly mindful that there are choices every day, every moment, in relationships and otherwise. Choice A, choice B.
Right, but the world would convince us otherwise, that we're in too deep, that we're too far gone. And you read the news, you read that, and you say, "Oh my God, there's no getting out of this one." And then I come back to this text often. I read that, and it reminds me that there's always still, from going back from our Torah, from Cain and Abel, from the very beginning of sin. Atatim shalbo, thou mayest. We can't give in to cowardliness or laziness, or right, that there is still that a new love for that glittering instrument, the human soul, which is often attacked but never destroyed because thou mayest.
So may, is that taking us back to the struggle with your own angel?
Say more.
That you're struggling, life is a constant struggle in that sense of a morality, I may go this way, I may go that way, I choose.
Nice.
But the choice is my own struggle. Maybe it shouldn't be a struggle, but sometimes it really is a struggle.
Yeah.
As to what's the right thing and what am I struggling with?
No, I love that. That's going back to Jacob wrestling with the angel, which again is like a very great image of struggle, of internal struggle, right? Of wrestling with your angels.
Yeah.
Good. Yes.
It's a small thing. If you eliminate evil inclination, how does that impact free will?
If you, wait until 10:05. That'll be food for thought for next, yeah, that's a great profound question that you need to chew on. But thank you, everybody. I always love learning with you. Thank you for coming. Great way to start a Shabbat. And just an announcement that at 10:30, if you're interested, is the Kavanah Minyan, Rabbi Alex's Wellness Center Minyan that focuses on spirituality and singing and meditation and text study. There's more text study there. So that's 10:30 and is it Gottlieb?
Yeah.
Gottlieb. Okay. Shabbat shalom, everyone.